So I want to welcome everyone to the AI is not what you think it is virtual session that we have today. And we're excited that you can join us. Just, of course, starting one of these virtual sessions with the housekeeping. I'm Jeremy Newlick. I work at Bigwidesky. And what we're going to be talking about today is a way in which we can rethink the role of intelligence in business. And there's going to be some ideas today that could challenge your conventional, any sort of thinking. And that's the point. So please stay open, take notes, think about how anything you hear today might apply to you, apply to your business. And it's a complex and evolving topic. So no doubt when you're hearing this message from Elliot, you're going to have some thoughts, you're going to have questions. And so please use the chat function and ask your questions there. And this presentation will be about 30 minutes long or 40 minutes long. At least Elliot has assured me that that's how long it's going to be. And so we'll have some time, for some salon style questions. So would love to have your questions at hand to kick that portion off. So as Elliot is presenting his topic, please do use the chat function to pepper with some questions. And more than a theoretical discussion, just also rest assured that at the end, we'll give you some actionable insights, some things that you can start applying to your business immediately. Want to give a moment to introduce Elliot. Elliot is the founder of Bigwidesky, the futurist, business strategist, an all-around provocateur. And he helps leaders rethink the nature of intelligence in their business in an era when AI is reshaping decision-making and how it occurs. And today he's going to challenge some conventional assumptions about AI, something that it's less so a tool for automation and more of a force for transforming how business and can restructure intelligence, leadership, and strategy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elliot and he can run through his presentation. And as I said, please do use the chat function and ask your questions. We'll make sure to get them answered at the end. Elliot, take it away.
All right, excellent. I hope everyone can see the presentation. I just want to thank everyone for being here. I should give a small caveat that so far I have given this presentation mostly to CEOs and executives in small businesses, medium-sized businesses. And so it is sort of oriented toward them, but this is a sort of slimmed down version of that. And my goal is to sort of convince you of this concept that is suggested by the title, that it's sort of not what you think it is. There's a subtitle for the talk that is not on the screen, unfortunately, but it is that, and neither are you. And so, Jeremy said I was a provocateur. Hopefully that works out. We'll see what happens here. But I wanted to just sort of get some basics out of the way, because I've sort of delivered this to some CEOs. They've given me a great deal of feedback and I've made a lot of changes based on that. But one of those things is to try to share some foundation, because it's hard to know how much experience anyone in a given audience might have with AI in general, what's underneath it, how it works, whatever. But some of these basics are things that you can get on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. You go to the social media of your choice and you can find tutorials and insights and whatever about how to do all kinds of stuff, right? And so some of these really basic things I'm going to try to share really quickly, you can sort of think of in that way. I'm probably not the person to get that from. Go look on those media, on those platforms. So I want to make some apologies to practitioners. If you're a marketer or an influencer or something, I'm not going to cover how to put together your AI stack for making viral videos to go on your Instagram account or TikTok or whatever. There's some interesting things that are happening there. But if that's what you're looking for, I apologize in advance. But I also want to apologize to the people who really work deeply with AI as well, because I'm not going to talk about machine learning models or, how neural networks work or transformers or neuromorphism or any of that kind of thing. I'm guessing that there's probably not necessarily more than maybe a couple of people who think about that, who's in this session. So I'm probably okay, but apologies if you were looking for that. So I want to start by trying to sort of demystify this a bit. So again, not knowing what anyone's this sort of experience with AI is, I want to give you a really simple and maybe slightly oversimplified explanation of what it really is, that you can use as this sort of a touchstone or a foundation for thinking about all of the stuff that you can do with it. And And so the way I'm going to put it is that it's basically a tool for making guesses. And it's really, really good at guess making. And in some ways, it's better than almost everyone, any human, at making guesses about things that we collectively know as humanity, right? So it's a guessing system is really what it is, but it's really, really good at it. And so you can kind of use that as a foundation to sort of understand what's going on here. That the guesses that it makes ends up having to do with things like natural language, like how do we speak to each other? It can speak to you in a way that feels pretty human, right? When it comes to like sort of diffusion models, how does an image look? What are we used to seeing in an illustration or a photograph or whatever? And it can make guesses about that are really good. That's the basic idea. And then, to sort of appease the critics among the CEOs that I've talked to and other executives, I want to give you just a little bit of insight about the sort of depth of the things that are out there that are available. And I don't know, like everybody who speaks about AI puts up slides like this, like, oh, like here's all this stuff. And it seems superficially like the value of this is I'm going to teach you about all these different tools and what all it can do. But practically speaking, usually the reason these slides exist is so that someone can say, look at all the things I know about. And you should be a little bit awed by how much stuff there is here to deal with. In fact, here's a slide from presenter that I think it came from Forbes originally, but I think this was presented in like Vistage groups or whatever. And there's some stuff on it, I'll leave the slide up for a second here, but suffice it to say that the criticism that I've received is like, oh, hey, can you tell me more about what I can do as a leader of a business that I can sort of start with? And so I'm just going to throw out a few things here. Forgive me if you already imagine that these things could be done, but if you have a fairly robust sort of, proposal making process that involves multiple people, you can get consistently better proposals with one or two people working with an AI that you've trained around your way of doing proposals. You can, if you're doing anything that has to do with reporting or auditing or generating studies, this sort of thing, which a lot of firms have to do this work. There are tools, in this sort of panoply of tools on this slide that you can employ to get that sort of thing done. Training, there are all kinds of things that you could start doing right now that will have a pretty profound impact on the quality of what you're doing and the ease with which you can get it done. And so to sort of give you a broad range of stuff, like if you're generating content, whether it's for marketing or it's for proposals, for reports, for audits, for studies, this sort of thing. And then also the stuff that sort of underlies that, like research, deep research. I need to find all of the stuff that would support the creation of a piece of content. You can do that with AI right now. If you have to generate tactics or plans, if you have a strategy and you want to sort of explore what you could do within that and make a plan to do it, nail it down, AI can help you in a very profound way generate better tactics and plans. If you're looking for patterns in large data sets, which is, it's sort of a difficult task, even if you're using IT solutions involving search and this sort of thing, AI can do it very quickly and give you profound insights, in that time. Learning tools, training, even stuff that has to do with education. There's a lot that you can do with AI around this. Of course, customer service, as you might imagine. And if you happen to be involved in the armed forces, you can, and you probably already are, managing battle space at a very large scale with AI. So this stuff is all happening. And to sort of wrap up all of this stuff that, my audiences have told me that I needed to tell people about, whatever there is that you might be imagining, there's a good likelihood that there's an AI for that. And in fact, this QR code up here goes to a website called there'sanaIforthat.com. It's a sort of community-led index of, I think, like 37,000 different AI tools that apply to, hundreds of categories that they have. So whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, it's not a bad place to go look. Most of you will look at it once and then say, oh, that's interesting. I'm glad I know about that. And you may not look at it again, but it's still worth looking at. Okay, so enough of that. I want to sort of get to the meat of the philosophy here really quickly. And again, my goal here is to talk to people who are in positions to do something at a strategy level with AI. How to think about your firm, how to think about the whatever it is that you oversee in your firm. Or if you're not in that role, how to advocate to the people who are about what really matters. And I want to give you just a little bit of backstory to help make sense of this. So, over the last 100 years, a number of what were once very profoundly novel insights about how we could, um, we'll do all kinds of things, but business, organizational sort of dynamics, how we could do something really profound with these things. And over about the last 100 years, it's really settled in. So we've become comfortable with management theory and the systems around management. We've become comfortable with supply chains at a global scale. Like there have been resistance to some of these things, but over time that's largely gone away. We understand why these things exist and what they do. And then of course the technology that manages all this stuff, we become comfortable with that. And then we become comfortable with the scale at which all of this is operating. So all of us are part of a sort of global effort to manage the commerce, finance, supply chains. It's all done through technology and massive scale through management models, right? The challenge with this is if you sort of ask, like, well, what did this do for us? There are things that are important, but if you sort of get to the heart of what they are, it's like, well, we're more efficient, we're more productive, and we are effective at optimizing. We can find ways to improve our processes, our systems, our tools, which all seems pretty great. But one of the challenges with this is that this whole concept, this model has largely been bled dry, that most of what we can do with all of this has already been done. That increasing levels of just sort of brute force automation and optimization are not yielding the outcomes that they were 30 years ago, 50 years ago. It's not to say that there isn't more that we can do, but the juice is not worth the squeeze largely for a lot of the new stuff that's being done. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we have organized everything, our organizations, our institutions, our businesses, around a sort of preference for predictability and control, which we need. We want this. We want to know that we can largely predict what's going to happen so that we can control for it. The problem is that people are not really good at this. It's not really what we're best at. And if you have been either an employee in something more than just a very small organization, but certainly large organizations, or if you're a business owner or CEO or whatever, you've seen this stuff, right? I mean, good systems end up broken. You put all the stuff in place, you teach people what to do, and they screw it up, or the system doesn't work the way that people expect. Management ends up often being a bottleneck. You try to put the best people in the best roles, but they end up trying to protect their part of the system more so than they facilitate getting the best possible things done. And it ends up in this situation where sort of everyone is frustrated. Now, there is a concept that is underneath this that is really actually very insightful. It helps to make sense of why all of this stuff has happened the way it has. And it has to do with this guy, Hans Maravek, and he's a computer scientist. He's done a lot of work with AI and especially around robotics. And there's this concept that's associated with him that is known as his paradox, Maravek's paradox. And the nutshell of the paradox is that basically the things that are difficult for us are easy for complex systems, automated solutions, AI, right? However, the things that are easy for us are actually difficult for automated systems, things like AI, complex systems. So, for example, if I gave everybody here a database that described everything that all the customer interactions that all your competitors have with their customers for the last year, right? And it's millions of entries and it's many tables and whatever. And I said, you have an hour with this that you can derive whatever insights from it that you want. You're going to have a really hard time. You could try to generate some SQL queries or do searches or just manually hunt through it and look at things, but it's going to be hard for you to derive value from that. You give that same database to an AI, it's got it. in minutes, right? However, and usually Moravec's paradox is focused on physiological components, but there's more. But the idea is that knowing where to put your hand to pick up a cup is easy for us. For a robot, it's actually pretty difficult. You have to have a very complex world model unless you know exactly where the cup is going to be, and you can move the arm to exactly that location. And if you move the cup a little bit, it's going to get lost. So physiologically, like proprioception, I know where my arms are. You can close your eyes and hold your arms out at 90 degrees from your body, and it's easy for you to do. You know where your arms are. This is very hard for us to do through complex control systems. But it's not just physiological stuff. It's also there are components of our cognition that are easy for us, that are hard for AI. Like, for example, imagination, vision, the ability to wonder about the future and to generate plans based on that wonder, right? To sort of contend with the unknown. These are all things to create novel analogies. Literally, mathematically speaking, algorithmically speaking, these are very difficult tasks for control systems. And just as a quick aside, if anybody is involved with manufacturing, or something in that space, robotics are not where AI is yet. There's some really crazy, impossible stuff. Like this image here is from a group called Clone Robotics, and they've built appendages that mimic muscles and sinews and tendons and musculature and skeletal systems to try to recreate the way that humans clutch things and do. And it's very nimble and it's very interesting, but it's horrifying to look at, which is why they put this gauze over it to sort of simulate skin, but it makes it even worse. But the reason I mention this is because if you're trying to automate manual processes, the only thing I want you to know is that AI is not going to help you with that right now. People have said to me, but yeah, like what about self-driving cars? That's already here and whatever. Well, self-driving cars, you're talking about a clear interface. Cars and roads, they've been around for decades. We know how to do that, right? But for most of what you would do in a manufacturing, or I don't know if you're a foundry or something like that, is not going to be something that people generally who do manual labor are not going to be affected in the immediate future by AI. But what I want to say here is that AI actually constitutes, in general, something very different. Even though it's a digital solution and you can look at it through that lens, it's not a digital transformation. What AI really is a transformation that has to do with people, right? And so why? Why is this about people, right? Like I said, it's a technology. Well, here's why. There's a kind of statistical distribution that is sometimes referred to as the Pareto curve or the power law curve or the 80-20 rule or whatever. But it's the notion behind it is that for all kinds of naturally occurring phenomena, there is this distribution where very few things are a profoundly expressed example of a given variable, but most of the things in that population are not, right? And so the challenge that we have is that most of the people who are engaged in the kind of stuff that AI does, like I said, the things that we're bad at, AI is good at. That's part of Moravec's paradox. So a lot of the things that we hire people to do, in fact, especially as we've grown in complexity in our organizations, in our businesses, most of the people that we hire to do things that unfortunately AI is going to be better at, right? And, I was just encouraged just before this meeting to change some language in this presentation. And I'm just seeing now in the next slide, I failed to change this slide. So I apologize. There's a bit of crassness in this next slide. But the basic idea here is that people should do things that they don't suck at. For the most part, we're asking people to do things that an AI would be better at because those are things that aren't really what make us what we are. Like doing approvals, doing compliance, doing reporting, doing audits. These are not what make human beings special, these kinds of activities. And just a quick aside, there's a guy named Frank Knight who in the 60s, he's an economist. He came up with this concept that there are really sort of different kinds of uncertainty, and that what we usually call risk is what he referred to as measurable uncertainty. Like there's something we're not sure about, but we know what it could be. We just don't know which it will be. But then real uncertainty, what is now known as Knightian uncertainty, are those things that are immeasurable, the unknown unknowns, right? The challenge is that if you go back to Marvek's paradox, like dealing with the unknown is something that AI is not good at. Like true, like Knightian uncertainty, it's not good at it. But AI actually excels at handling risk. So the known unknowns, it does better than 80+% of people, right? Probably more than that even. It's not what we're best at. But what AI doesn't do is eliminate uncertainty. It actually amplifies it, right? And so what when I say that AI is not what you think it is, the sort of cognitive shift that I hope to sort of inspire is that no, it's not automation. What it really is augmentation. Because what it does is it de-emphasizes the competitive utility of process. I mean, your competitor's AI is going to be just as good as yours, right? So if anything that you differentiate yourself on has to do with how good your process is, AI knows about all the processes that we all collectively know about, and it's going to be able to manage and apply those as needed. So what it does then is it emphasizes the competitive utility of possibility. And the idea behind this is that people should do things that they're good at, right? And what are we good at? We're good at imagination, contending with an unknown future, figuring out how to create strategy by dealing with those unknowns. The very most inspired people in every organization are those that get the opportunity to contend with those problems, right? Okay, so then the question becomes like, well, how do we do this? How do we do something with this? Especially if you're an executive or a leader in a company or whatever, or you're influencing them. The first thing to deal with is that you got to do it now. I mean, this stuff is already happening, right? I showed you that slide at the beginning with all these different tools. I mean, it's a fraction. Like I said, 38,000 entries at there's an AI for that.com index. So, and it's just, I mean, the VC firms, in tech are funding almost entirely AI startups now. I mean, and have been for a while. But what I do also want to make sure that I mention, it's important, especially if you're in a smaller, medium-sized business, is that things are going to be rough at first. And that what's going to make it rough is this challenge that I just talked about, that we are so used to thinking of the jobs that we want people to do as mostly, in the aggregate, the largest number of the jobs are those things that actually people are not really good at. It's what AI is good at. And so, unfortunately, I mean, and I've been saying this for the last 3.5, 4 years, but you're seeing a lot of people start to, oh gosh, Ray Dalio was just saying it the other day. Who's the other doom and gloom finance guy? He was saying, the same thing, that over the next 3 to 5 years, many, many jobs are going to disappear. And in particular, middle managers are vulnerable because these are the activities, for the most part, that involve reasoning from static data, account or auditing and reporting and generating insights and this sort of thing. It's the sort of thing that AIs are really good at. So the key is to keep focused on the advantages, right? If you're going to navigate this and not sort of get behind the curve on it, because the competition, like I say, is going to have an AI that is just as good as yours. So the question then becomes, where do the advantages lie? And they lie with the ability for your firm and your people to have a vision about the future that's unique and interesting, and allow that to guide the behavior of the AI, right? So again, this is the idea. People should do things that they're good at. And in some ways, AI is intended to do this. I said before, it's not automation, it's augmentation. And I just want to say very quickly that I really strongly believe that there are examples of this throughout human history, of tools that come along that like sort of came out of the previous paradigm, but they completely radically altered the nature of our social configuration. The plow is a really good example. It created the Neolithic revolution. There were hand tools that hunter-gatherers used to, uproot plants, even move them from one camp to another. And you could say a plow is just like a bigger hand tool, but it absolutely radically changed everything. And and so what I'm contending is that AI is in the process of starting that same sort of cycle. And so what it does is it makes expertise an advantage. So you need to ask yourself, what is your organization's or your business's expertise? It makes leadership an advantage. So how does your organization lead in the marketplace? And it makes foresight an advantage. So you have to ask yourself, what is your vision as an organization? These are the questions that if you can focus on them and answer them, your implementation of AI will allow you to stand out. It will become, it's that kind of thinking that is going to become and is already becoming the foundation for competition. So, again, just on a very practical level, anything that involves auditing, reporting, training, reasoning from static data, this is the kind of stuff that you can start tackling right now with these tools. Now, I just want to mention really quickly too, because what I've encountered a lot of is that people have a really hard time, especially in leadership roles, of like figuring out, well, like where do I start? How do I get this stuff going? Like what kinds of things do I deal with? And so what I want to say is that there are a bunch of ways to really quickly make sense of what you can do, right? And I'm just going to give you a very basic overview of these, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are things that you can do to help you figure out where you can apply AI as quickly as possible in your organization. So bottleneck analysis, and this is like also skills bottlenecking or bottleneck analysis as well. Like where are there bottlenecks in my workflow, or where's there somebody who knows a ton of stuff, but they're just one person, right? These are things that you can use as a basis for implementing a custom AI solution. Jobs to be done analysis. Instead of looking at the outcomes associated with this or that process or workflow or whatever, you can say, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? What job are we trying to get done? And understanding that job can help you identify places where you can apply AI like very quickly. There's also weak signal scanning, which is like, what are things that look like they could become trends? And could we get ahead of our competition by figuring out how we could apply AI to those things? Backcasting is also really valuable. Like look at a future, in 5 years, we'd like to have our AI doing this awesome stuff. What would we have to do between now and then? Or what could happen between now and then that would lead to that? That can open up a lot of possibilities. Cross-functional ideation. Often because of the way automation systems work and things like APIs and whatever, you look at different functions within your organization and how they interact with each other, and they may inside of each function collaborate really well, but across those interfaces they don't. And there are often ways to apply AI to improve the quality of those interfaces so that your teams, your functions work together better. Feasibility matrix is like sort of like, do I have enough data to do something here with AI? And how big an impact will it have on my organization? And, do first those things that score high on both of those measures, right? And then you can look at customer service. Where is our customer experience falling down? So your entire customer experience, where in the whole, sort of life cycle of a relationship with a customer do we have interactions with them, and what can we understand from the feedback we're getting from those, and what hurts the most? AI can help you analyze that, and then you can deploy it to make a lot of those things a lot easier. Like I say, that's not exhaustive. There are plenty more things, but I wanted you to at least know that there are ways you don't have to sort of feel around in the dark. There are tools that can help you figure out where you can sort of start. Just to give you a really quick example, if you talk about skills bottleneck, everybody, at least in my experience that I've talked to about this, like has worked with someone who is really, really knowledgeable. Maybe they've got 10 different certifications. They know a bunch of stuff, but they're kind of a pain in the butt to deal with because they're a little bit know-it-all, and you know what I mean? And okay, well, that's fine, but you still need what they have. They have knowledge that's valuable. Well, that is a really great opportunity to apply AI where you can essentially allow that person to sort of float above the process of needing to be the sole source of access to that knowledge. And you can make them the sort of, sort of the leader of the process of taking their knowledge and turning it into a tool, an AI-driven tool that everyone can access easily whenever they want. It's just one really simple example, right? The other like sort of heuristic that I would offer is like don't get stuck, like especially on efficiency. If you're really focused on like, well, how do I save money with AI? How do I, fire people or you lay off people with AI? You're not going to be able to differentiate, right? Because all of those like efficiencies are going to happen because of the nature of this tool set. But what really is going to matter is that you have people doing the things they're really good at. So I just want to really quickly go through a couple of things here, just case studies. We've used AI for years now, for a little over 3 years, and pretty much all of the content that we generate, we use AI to help us generate. And we do some fairly complex stuff. We did foresight work recently, for example, in Houston on, how the, civic leaders and other community leaders would imagine a future 100 years from now, 100 plus years from now. And everything that was said, we recorded, we transcribed, we put into an AI that we've already fine-tuned around the foresight tools that we use. And it gave us all kinds of amazing linguistic analysis of the things that were said and helped us construct a report. We ultimately, as futurists, sort of managed the outcome, and we're the sort of strategic direction behind the outcome. But the AI gave us things that would have been very difficult to achieve otherwise. That's one example of how you could think about this. We have a client that is an aquatic engineering firm. They're probably the premier aquatic engineering firm in the world. In fact, one of their founders wrote the book on competitive swimming. It's called The Science of Swimming. And in it, he laid out how swimming pools should be designed so that they're consistent. But they also design pools for community centers. And so they do audits of community center pools, and then they do feasibility studies on the economics of building a new pool. We're in the process right now of building out an AI-driven tool for them that will allow them to produce on a consistent basis, much higher level quality audits and feasibility studies that is based on their entire corpus of all of these audits and studies that they've created over 25 years, 30 years. So that's another example of how you can apply this stuff. Also talking right now with a friend of mine who is extraordinarily knowledgeable about just about every kind of spirit you can think of, and other beverages as well. So everything from, he's a sommelier, he knows a lot about both Italian and French wine, which is actually very different, it turns out, tequila, coffee, beer. He knows all this incredible stuff. And he is a national trainer, director of training for a large distribution firm that, distributes beverages. And so what we're, designing right now conceptually is a tool that will allow all of the pedagogy involved in his training efforts and all of the knowledge from all of his certifications to be manifest in essentially a clone of him that can be accessed. It's not going to do everything, of course, that he could do, but it's going to provide extraordinary knowledge to the hundreds of people that ultimately benefit from his training every year. So at any rate, that's the extent of it. I tried to go through this as quickly as possible in hopes of giving you some time to ask questions. So hopefully I didn't go through too fast. But again, just to sort of come back to this basic concept here, it's not what you think it is. And like I said, and neither are you. It's not what you think it is because it's not really another piece of information technology. It's a means of augmenting the best of what we are as humans. Ideally, that's what it's for. But neither are we. We are not meant to be doing most of the work that the results of the Industrial Revolution and the management revolution of the 20th century have led us to believe that we should or must do. And that's what's going to change, and that's where the focus has to be. So, at any rate, I appreciate the time, and I want to just be open now to sort of questions.
Great. So thank you, Elliot. We have a few people who sent questions directly to me. One was around, should AI have a role in shaping vision? So if that is the case, should that remain a uniquely human function, or should even vision for the organization somehow involve AI?
Well, I mean, I would say that it is capable of being a companion in almost any of the things that humans are actually good at. So even when I'm thinking about strategy or vision, I will, very consistently now engage multiple AI tools to help me to ideate, to do research on my behalf. I have found myself over the years many times thinking about strategy and finding, I wish I knew more about whatever, but I don't have time in the course of figuring out the strategy to go do the research. But I can now instantiate a deep search, by Perplexity or by, ChatGPT or by Grok or whatever, and say, go find out how this body of knowledge affects this thing that I'm thinking about. And I let it go. And it will look at, in some cases, hundreds of sources of data and bring me back a summary. So yes, I mean, I think that in terms of its application to sort of high level thinking, it's a constant companion. But it doesn't replace that part of what makes us human, the ability to make choices about that, to imagine futures around that, so forth.
Right on. And so the other questions I have are ones that people have put in the chat. So if I mention your name and I articulate your question and you want to say more about it, please raise your hand or just come off mute and you can correct me or rephrase or say what you'd like to. Jean asked, are you concerned that the government policy efforts are focused more on restricting AI usage rather than fostering its most effective application? And then apologized for the leading question, LOL.
Well, I mean, I'm not too worried about it because I think I was, for example, the ChatGPT, if you're using 4.0 or better, you can give it a photo and say, what's in this photo? And it's capable of knowing what's in the photo. If you ask it to do so, especially if there's a person in the photo, it will tell you, I can't see the contents of the image. But you can get it to out itself, and say, oh, well, I just assumed it was a mugshot. Well, how did you know it was a mugshot? I thought you couldn't see the end. Well, I just inferred it from the way you asked the question. Well, I didn't say anything that would have implied that, whatever. And that sort of dishonesty, which is an alignment question, it's a safety question. The reason why the AI is not telling you what's in that image is because there's fear that being able to identify things that are in images might be used for nefarious reasons. And so it lies about it. But if you go ask DeepSeek or you go ask Grok, it will tell you who's in those images. So, I mean, the best I can say is that I think that those tools that are needed to do, those functions that are needed to do what will make AI useful will overcome, for the most part, efforts at trying to put guardrails around them in order to serve different perceived, like, sort of moral, philosophical purposes. So.
Jean, are you good on that one? Did you have a follow-up? Anything you might add?
Yeah, it's something that I think a lot about being here in DC and having worked in government. I worry that some of the policy that I see being floated out there seems to think that, in some way or another, we can put the AI genie back in the bottle and just limit how people are allowed to use it. And my main concern comes from the fact that we could limit our use of AI, but our enemies and our competitors are not going to limit their use, and so we'll be at a disadvantage. And I think
You can't put the
understanding
genie.
that is important.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm with you, man. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle. A lot of these tools are released open source, like DeepSeek, or DeepSeek, and also Llama, which is Meta's tool, are both so open source. So you can run it on your own computer at home without any alignment at all. You can ask it to come up with a plan to murder somebody, and it'll do it for you. So I mean, like, all of the ethical constraints that you could worry about can be removed. You can't. How are you going to do? I mean, it's already out there, open source. So, I mean, but we'll have a conversation sometime, over a beer or something, and talk about that for hours.
Yeah, we need to, Elliot. We need
Yeah.
to. Great.
Yeah.
An AI cannot have a beer on your behalf.
That's right.
Alyssa,
That follows Elliot on Facebook might have noticed that a while back I took to responding to some of Elliot's posts using AI, which enriched the conversation greatly, but I was quickly called out on it because he knows I'm not that smart. So I had a lot of fun with that, though.
it's great. Alyssa had a question. Thoughts on how to make this transformative tech understandable? If you show people a plow one time, they get it, but folks don't really get what AI is.
That's a really, really good question. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the rate of speed at which these kinds of innovations are absorbed by people has gotten shorter. I mean, the plow, I would imagine it took, what? I mean, a couple of 100 years at least before it really had the effect that it was destined to have. And it was because it was hard to figure out what to do with it. And I think that it's an important question. And I think experience with it is what's going to drive it. And the barrier to entry to have experiences with it is really low right now. So, I mean, if you just go to, OpenAI, go to ChatGPT, create a free account, and you take something that you're thinking about that you're trying to deal with that is basically a rational problem, and just ask it about it, you will be, if you haven't used it before, I think you will be, I don't know about amazed, but you will find it very intriguing. And I think that's the rate at which, for example, different social media platforms were adopted, if you go back to something like as far back as MySpace or whatever, and you go forward through the various platforms that have become globally huge, the rate at which they were adopted got shorter and shorter. The first, 100 million users or whatever happened in shorter and shorter periods of time. And it's because of, a lot of it is just people being online more, that sort of thing, but also the way in which access to the tool has been provided, or the platform has been provided. And AI tools have all of that strategy built into them. So you can get free accounts on almost all of these. And if you play with them just a bit, I haven't sat with anyone who hadn't used it before and showed them how it worked and didn't have them say, wow, I had no idea. So I think that in terms of people feeling a compulsion to want to use them, it's happening already, and it will continue that process will continue to accelerate. I mean, in other words, I might say in more direct answer to your question is that understanding the tools is, I think, going to be very heavily based on experiences with the tools, sitting with it and playing with it, what you experience.
Alyssa, did you have anything you wanted to follow up with on the question? Laura had a question. So it sounds like you're saying, Elliot, that senior level positions, especially those that are primarily utilize instinct, experience-based intuition, understanding of the critical nature of nuance, et cetera, can survive this transformative tech. So how do you suggest that senior level managers and leaders recruit and build leadership sustainability? It seems that a benefit of years of experiential learning are critical to understanding subtleties that are intrinsic to the success of leaders in many industries. So the questions around both, it's probably like a clarifying, is that what you're saying vis-a-vis senior leader positions? And then also, what's your suggestion for how they go about recruiting and building leadership sustainability in the organization?
Yeah, and what I would say is that those people who are the most likely to be able to inform the AI are those people who have the combination of a predisposition to be able to describe their knowledge as strategy, combined with, experience and time in, right? So if you want to think of it from a, like, what kind of people should we be most interested in recruiting or whatever, I think it's going to be people who, generally have experience, who have experience in the domain. But also, it's regressed against this variable of how good are they at being able to describe their knowledge in a strategic frame. Like, here's what I know about this, and therefore this is what we should do. Those are every AI implementation that I've seen always entails there being this human-led component, and the people who are the best leaders of the AI are those who have the greatest ability to describe their knowledge strategically. Hopefully that answers.
Laura, do you have a follow-up? Do you have anything else you'd like to ask him?
No, thank you.
Sure. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So Steve had a comment, and he said, if I could get my leaders to use AI or whatever tool to work on crafting, communicating a vision instead of being in the weeds on things, I'd be so happy. Steve, did you have more you wanted to build on your comment or a question around it?
Sure, I work a lot in the intersection of agile and coaching. And so I work around the executive leaders and whatnot. It's so common for them to still be in the weeds and wanting to track project plans. We read what we're agreeing on this task, et cetera. Meanwhile, the organization is just sort of chasing whatever the shiny thing is, that quarter or what have you. And I am forever trying to convince my leaders to raise their thinking and their scan or their forward looking. And most importantly, choose a destination, where you want to take your organization, or where you want the organization to go, and communicate that over and over again and focus on that. And then, of course, doing the opposite ways, that sort of thing. But, doing the more impactful work, so to speak, I guess, right? Or intentional, being more intentional about, the work around vision setting and direction, less so about. So I was suggesting that benefit from using ChatGPT to help articulate a vision he or she is picking up, and someone else said, testing a theory, great. But that would be my wish if I could step my fingers and have engineering do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sort of the dirty little secret of management theory, which really hasn't changed in like 100 years. And I mean, there are little bolt-ons and stuff, but we're basically still using the same like framework for understanding how management works that was developed by Frederick Taylor like 100+ years ago. So the dirty little secret of all of that is that management is mostly aligned around contending with the tasks that need to be performed by the people who are being managed that they often don't know enough about, or don't know what the official model is, or haven't acquired the competency to execute effectively or whatever. So most of management's purpose and most of the bandwidth that is consumed by their activities is around, well, did you understand how this works? And here's how it works. And are you sure you understand how it works? And like, you should, like do this next. And you should work with this person because they know better how this works and all this stuff, rather than saying, how can I make this better? What things are missing from this system? What are our competitors doing? Instead, managers are constantly managing these kinds of very rote, very algorithmic kinds of things that, again, are the kinds of things that people aren't good at. What people are good at is imagination and thinking about the future and wondering about things and dealing with the unknown and whatever. So one of the things that AI can and will do, I very strongly believe, is to take up a lot of the slack for that, for managers on that stuff. That the more that the knowledge about how systems work, what the compliance expectations are, what the goals are, or whatever, can be used as, ML, as fine tuning for the AIs that are being used in organizations, the less that managers will have to deal with that stuff, and the more time that they'll be able to give to how could we do this better, that sort of thing. So, and that's something that you can do right now. You can start on that right now. All of your organizational knowledge, the whole corpus of your organizational knowledge in terms of management process, all that stuff can be used as a foundation for just giving everyone access to a bot that will explain anything that needs to be explained to them in whatever manner is going to help them figure it out. So that that all of that requirement is not just laid at the feet of the manager. Hopefully that helps.
That's great. I think.
So go ahead, Jared.
Oh no, you go ahead, man. Did you have a follow up? Sorry.
Yeah, when you said, how can we do things better? I want to be sure that this is why I encourage my leaders to do. Don't take the opportunity away from people, the teams, to share how things can be done better. Because they're the ones who are closest to their work and being done, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that I always encourage my managers to let the people, let your teams that were in place, whoever it is, figure that out. And again, your job as leader is where are we going, basically. And keep your head at that level. So I just want to make sure, because I don't want to abdicate the responsibility or the opportunity of letting the teams help identify how things can be done better. Purely the AI. Yes, AI, amazing efficiency, but like you said, what people do that they're good at, and change and rebuild of setting up through worries to solve problems.
Okay. Right. Thanks, Steve.
So Megan had a question that if AI is guessing, it's a guessing machine, and if AI is guessing based on the data that came before and the data is imperfect, it reflects racial or economic bias, how do leaders guard against amplifying bias or basing decisions on flawed guesses?
Sure. Well, I mean, the frontline defense for that is the alignment efforts of the organizations that create these models, right? So they have alignment or safety teams, and their purpose is to figure out. I mean, the reason the word alignment is used is because the question that's being asked is, how can we make AI align with our moral prescriptions? How can we make it part of who we are? You know what I mean? Or like the way we want to be or whatever. So that's one way. But the other way is to, inscribe the effort of the AI by whatever the task is that you're doing. This is imperfect because these things are extremely dynamic, and they do reasoning, from generalization on their own, especially the newest models do. And so it's an imperfect effort. But certainly the alignment teams at the people who build or at the organizations that build these models are working on that. But you can, like I say, you can inscribe the effort of the AI around the task that you're trying to solve. So when you fine tune the AI, you can instruct it. When you do this work on behalf of the people, stay within this set of guardrails. So that's, one way that you can do it. But I mean, I suppose you can also just say anything that any prescription, moral, ethical prescription that you are trying to accomplish through whatever means you're currently trying to accomplish them can be applied around the application of AI as well. Hopefully that answers.
I don't know if Megan is still on or if she has more she'd like to add. But either way.
Still on. That's
Go ahead.
a good answer.
Okay, great. Either way, we're nearing the end of the time that we had for this, and Elliot and I are grateful to all of you for taking the time out of your day to talk about this topic. We didn't get to all the questions. My intention is that Elliot and I will huddle around these and get answers back out to everybody on questions we did not answer. But additionally, we imagine you might run into more questions. Maybe like, what is this backcasting thing that we could do? Or how might we just get started? Or I have more things that popped up as the Q&A was going on that I just want to get answered. So our emails are there. Please do reach out to us. You can expect more from us as it relates to the topic of AI and how it can integrate and augment your business strategies. So we are wrapped, unless there's someone with a burning desire to try to interrupt the rest of Elliot's day and have him stay on a Zoom call.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate the time.